Good morning. Welcome to episode 46 of the Driller Newscast, your weekly update on the news and stories impacting the water and drilling industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy. This week in the news, we will discuss how our tax dollars have been utilized for the Federal Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. For our feature this week, we will discuss tribal rights to water and water rights settlements that will ensure tribal nations have control over their water supplies. But before we talk tax dollars, let's talk about preventing our assets from going up into smoke with this week's safety topic on fire. For this week's safety topic, I want to talk about fires. Do you have an action plan for equipment fires or job site fires? What is your plan? As we continue to work in drier conditions, reaction time is critical. Most plans consist of evacuating the site, calling 911, and watching it burn. Too many times have I heard that story. In many cases, calling 911 and evacuating is the best way to handle the situation. The first step to an action plan should always be employee safety. If your company is working in an area with holes that can produce flammable gas, then all employees should wear fire-resistant or retardant clothing. Most severe burns and death happen when non-FR clothing ignites and continues to burn. FR clothing requires special care and needs to be washed properly to ensure the fire retardant stays intact. I want you to think about that as we get grease on it, as other situations happen. It's no longer in the same condition. We can't treat this like the old yellow reflective vest that's covered in copper coat and is barely reflective. We have to take care of our safety gear if you want it to take care of us. The next step is identifying the type of fire. Is it environmental, such as downhole gas, or is it caused by equipment failures? If it is caused by gas, evacuation is the best plan and the safest plan. We're just not John Wayne and Hellfighters, and we're prepared to do that. However, if the fire is caused by a malfunction, such as electrical issues or hydraulic line breaking, there might be time to put it out. If your action plan includes using a fire extinguisher, use it from a safe distance. The fire extinguisher used on an equipment fire must be a Class B or C. It is important to ensure that your fire extinguisher is up to date and inspected monthly by your team and yearly by a professional. Then it's up to thinking about how we're going to be prepared before we leave the job site. The decision for putting out a fire depends on your action plan and what collateral damage is around the equipment. If you're putting fires out to prevent a home fire or even a blaze of multiple residents, then putting out the fire is the right decision. I want you to consider weather conditions, dry conditions. Do we have a fire watch? Do we have a hot work permit? Are we preparing to be able to put that out? Is that fire extinguisher within reach? Is it in good working order? Next, we work a lot of rural areas. How fast can the first responders arrive? These are all the things we need to consider. Now, I want you to consider the videos, the photos we've seen of equipment fires and understanding the importance of reaction time and being prepared. Contact your local fire department or your safety professional training team and get some hands-on training of using a fire extinguisher. It's a great team building exercise, and it's very important for us to be able to react by saying, get the fire extinguisher, I'm calling 911, and having that plan in place. Be safe out there. This week in the news, I want to highlight where the infrastructure law and inflation reduction dollars are influencing the drilling and water industry. That's right, our tax dollars, how can they influence our business? Well, it's $12.3 billion for securing reliable water. The bipartisan infrastructure law allocated $8.3 billion for the Bureau of Reclamation water infrastructure projects over the next 5 years to advance drought resilience and expand access to clean water for families, farmers, and wildlife. The investment will repair aging water delivery systems, secure dams, complete rural water projects, protect aquatic ecosystems, and fulfill Indian water rights settlements. That's right. There's water wells to be drilled. We need to be part of them. The Inflation Reduction Act adds an additional $4 billion to address this same crisis. Combined, these two initiatives represent the largest investment in climate resilience in our nation's history and provide a once-in-a-generation opportunity to impact our water infrastructure. And drillers, pump setters, we need to be involved in it. Where's our tax dollars going next? We've talked about it before, but it's abandoning orphan wells. The infrastructure law has $4.7 billion invested. How is that invested? It's divided into 3 programs. $4.3 billion to be used to plug orphan wells on state and private lands. $250 million to cap orphan wells on public lands, including in national parks, national forests, and wildlife refuge. And $150 million to cap orphan wells on tribal lands. This year, and we're only a month in, the department has allocated an initial $33 million to clean up 277 orphan wells in national parks, national forests, and national wildlife refuge, and other public lands, and distributed the first $560 million in initial grants to states to set up well plugging infrastructure and high priority well consultation. Guidance informed by tribal consultants and listening sessions has also been shared to help the tribes on how to apply for the first $50 million in funding to address orphan wells on tribal lands. We need to be involved in this money. We need to be people plugging these wells. Orphan oil and gas wells are polluting backyards, recreation areas, community spaces across the country. Just last week, there was a huge kickoff in the state of Louisiana with their first $25 million, with stakeholder meetings and having discussions about who should be involved and what professionals are doing it. Finally, where is our money going? It's going to discover the unknown. In 2022, we saw the largest geoscience investment from the infrastructure law. And it was to the USGS Earth Mapping Resource Initiative, Earth MRI. This is a partnership among the USGS, the Association of American State Geologists, and other federal, state, tribal, and private sector organizations to modernize the nation's surface and subsurface mapping. The infrastructure law funding will help accelerate the identification of areas with potential critical mineral resources still in the ground and in mine waste. The law augments the funding of the Earth MRI with an additional $64 million per year over the next 5 years for a total of $320 million. The expansion and acceleration of the Earth MRI through the infrastructure law funding will yield new understanding of potential for sustainable mineral production and mine waste reprocessing and remediation in the United States. Mine waste processing is a big deal to us, to the tailing ponds, to when I was working Buckhorn Mine in Republic, Washington, and a young man there said, I believe we need to go back through this tailings pond and see what amount of gold has been lost over the last 75 years. And they found a lot. This data collected through the expanded Earth MRI will support development of a national mine waste inventory, development of assessments of quantifying the nation's domestic mineral resources. We saw that we cannot be dependent on the rest of the world for our rare earth minerals, and that means mining here. So if there's a big piece that I can show to what's happening with the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act money and our tax dollars, that we have this big opinion that right now, oh, we're just giving money away and this is just too crazy. There's a lot of money being given to the drilling industry, from mining to road building to water projects to infrastructure for utilities using HDD, and we need to be involved in it. And finally, that orphan well, oil and gas wells abandonment that I keep talking about, it's because we don't have enough contractors to get involved and do it. So if you're competent at abandoning wells, and you want to scale up, now is the time. There's $4.7 billion. And if Louisiana has already jumped right out the gate right here in January with having the feds down there having a discussion about it, Michigan, wake up. Texas, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia. There's plenty of places, Oklahoma, that we need to be focusing on abandoning these wells. And the next thing you're going to see, and we talked about this last year, the ability to use some of these abandoned wells for geothermal. And we'll get into that in the next few weeks. For our feature this week, it's the last couple of days of January. We're heading into February. Keep seeing the hot button topic of water use. Who has the rights to it? We're seeing the fight right now with Scottsdale and the neighboring town who had been pulling water for quite a bit of time in Arizona. And this comes back to the Colorado River in Arizona and tribal nations. Congress is continuing to progress on protecting tribal sovereignty. And they have to do that through the federal government upholding its responsibility to treaties made with tribal communities, treaties from the 1860s. This is from the Department of Interior. Water rights settlements help ensure that tribal nations have safe, reliable water supplies, improve environmental and health concerns on reservations, and enable economic growth. And that's the big one, economic growth. These settlements have the potential to end decades of controversy and contention amongst tribal nations and neighboring communities and promote cooperation in the management of water resources. Indian water rights settlements also promote community and economic development for regions surrounding tribal communities. We have to resolve these conflicts. We need to be able to utilize that vital infrastructure water and understand how we're going to execute upon making sure they have their rights. We talk about senior water rights holders in California, and we look at what's happening in Arizona and throughout all of the Western United States right now. And these tribal sovereign nations, people that were here before we called it America, they definitely have senior water rights. At the department, the Secretary's Indian Water Rights Office manages, negotiates, and oversees implementation of Indian water rights claims and is committed to continuing to work with tribes across the West as they seek to realize their long-promised water rights. There are three big water rights settlements that are going on right now in Arizona and the Colorado Compact. And it starts with the Hualapai tribe and their Water Rights Settlement Act of 2022. The tribe's rights claim in Arizona and is the result of over a decade of dedicated good faith negotiations among the tribe, the federal government, the state of Arizona, and other parties. The bill approves a settlement agreement that will provide much needed water to the tribe and establishes a trust fund of $312 million that the tribe can use to develop water infrastructure on its reservation. The Act's provisions will help provide certainty to the tribe and to the surrounding communities regarding access to water resources and enables the tribal economic growth and promote tribal sovereignty and self-sufficiency. It's a big deal. They have absolute right to that water. Next one is an act amended the White Mountain Apache Tribe Water Rights Quantification Act of 2010, which has modified the enforceability date for certain provisions and for other purposes. This act amends the White Mountain Apache Tribe's settlement for the tribe's water rights claim in Arizona. The act authorizes the design and construction of a rural water system to address the dire need for domestic water supply on the tribe's reservations. Working closely with experts at the Bureau of Reclamation, the tribe identified critical changes to the infrastructure design, along with the need for additional funding to complete the project. This amendment provides the additional $530 million needed to complete the construction of rural water systems. Again, infrastructure money. We think about what's happening in Arizona. Think of those sovereign tribal nations. The final one we need to talk about, the Colorado River Indian Tribes Water Resiliency Act of 2022. This act authorizes Colorado River Indian tribes to lease, exchange, store, or conserve portions of their decreed water rights located in the state of Arizona to off-reservation users. That's right, economic growth. This act, the product of many years of diligent negotiations among the tribe, the state, and non-Indian water users, reflects the federal government's commitment to the tribe with self-determination for tribal sovereignty. These tribes are the Mojave, Chemehuevi, Hopi, and Navajo. They have 720,000 acre feet allotment. Here's the deal. These sovereign nations deserve their water rights. And these new laws supplement significant resources in the infrastructure law, which directly provides more than $13 billion in tribal communities across the country and makes tribal communities eligible for billions more in much needed investment. This includes $2.5 billion to implement the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund, which will help deliver long-promised water resources to tribes, giving them certainty to all of their non-Indian neighbors and a solid foundation for future economic development for the entire communities dependent on common water resources. These infrastructure dollars, which we've just led right into our feature, have water wells, have lots of opportunities for us to abandon orphan oil and gas wells on tribal lands to help with water infrastructure. And it's something we need to be looking at. And it's been unjust for decades, lots of decades. And those sovereign nations deserve their water. As we're looking at this Western water fight that we continue to talk about and the allotments, these sovereign nations that were given this land in the Western United States, it's their water. Let's continue to think about this. This is big as we go into DC and the fly-in and how we can help and how money is allocated. And we saw it today with science, with abandoning orphan wells, with drought-resilient infrastructure dollars, to building proper water infrastructure on tribal lands, which will also help the communities around them and allow them to be able to store and allocate water, sell water to where it needs to be. It's a big topic. We'll continue on it. Thank you for joining us for episode 46 of the Driller Newscast. It's been a crazy month, and we really need to think about where things are going next. And water rights, how we are involved in the federal infrastructure law money, the Inflation Reduction Act money. We haven't even talked about all the things going on with geothermal this year and all of the money dedicated to that and what's happening in New York and Pennsylvania and across the country. There's a lot to be done. And why have we covered where our tax dollars are going and what's going on right now? Because there's this silly topic that keeps coming up about recession. With the road building, the horizontal directional drill infrastructure for internet and power, to all the green energies initiatives, to rare earth minerals, and then again, water and drought resilience. And why do we keep saying drought resilience? I live in Michigan, and they talk about 70% of the population of Michigan is in a drought-ish situation. And we're the Great Lakes states. We see this in the Northeast, in the Southeast, and throughout our country. We see it throughout the world. Somebody's got to discover the unknown, find that water, find those resources, help build a better world that's fighting this climate change. And that's us. Have a safe and productive February.